Simultaneously, January has somehow gone super fast but also super slow, but at the very least we finished a bunch of games on the channel, so it's time to go over all the games I finished in January 2025. First is one we did start in December, but plans kind of got a little bit all over the place, so we didn't finish it until January, but we finally did the Silent Hill 2 remake! I have many thoughts on this one, and if you would like to hear them more in depth, I do have a video coming out on my YouTube channel in a few weeks that goes into depth the comparisons between this one and the original, as well as my full thoughts, but I can tell you right now, this is a 9 out of 10. I loved this game so much. It made me feel a type of way I have not felt since playing the original game. I think it did such a good job at remaking that original and keeping like the vibe and the atmosphere and everything the same. I love how they did the characters and the voice acting and all of the cutscenes, and just the only thing keeping this from being a 10 out of 10 for me and knocking it back down to a 9 alongside the original is the pacing felt a little bit slow kind of towards the final third of the game, especially that labyrinth section. I do not think they needed to make that as long as they did. And I just found it a little bit difficult sometimes to like pick up and interact with objects. It was very specific at where you needed to be standing in front of them, but otherwise, fantastic game. I loved it. Next is another remake. We played the Until Dawn remake. This one also sits tied with its original version at a 9 out of 10. This one I actually finished playing in 2 sittings. We just sat down and played it for like 6 hours straight the first time, which I think speaks volumes at how good it is. I loved going back and experiencing Until Dawn again for kind of the first time. And we managed to get ourselves a cheeky little no death run as well. I think overall it did a really good job at, again, capturing the original's vibe but refreshing it a little bit. I like the new camera angles and scenes and interactions they had with characters. I think the characters looked really good as well. Again, just a couple little issues here and there with interacting with objects and maneuverability and that sort of jazz, but otherwise, fantastic. Definitely the definitive way to play Until Dawn. And again, if you would like to hear more in-depth thoughts and comparisons against the original, I also have a YouTube video coming out on this one as well. Next, we jumped back onto the Resident Evil train and we played both the Umbrella Chronicles and the Dark Side Chronicles. I played both of these ones on the PS3 version with the analog controller instead of the Move controller, and honestly, they worked pretty well. Granted, we did play on easy, but I didn't find any part of these games particularly difficult. We had a couple deaths here and there to some bosses, but overall, I think using the controller was just fine. For anyone unfamiliar with the Chronicles games, they are basically on-rail shooter abridged versions of some of the main Resident Evil games, so Umbrella Chronicles details 0, 1, and 3. And I like the little abridged versions. It's nice to go back through everything and just look at everything with kind of a fresh coat of paint. And I just really love a good on-rail shooter. I had so much fun with this game. This one gets a 7 out of 10 from me. And swiftly following up with the Dark Side Chronicles, which is again the same deal, but this one details Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil Code Veronica, and it has its own little side story called Operation Javier. This one also gets a 7 out of 10 from me, but for a few reasons. Umbrella Chronicles didn't rate higher just because it is a short game. They're already detailing stories that kind of already exist. They're very fun, but they can just be a little funny at points. Dark Side Chronicles, I think, added in a lot of good quality of life improvements to the original. Now when you pick up herbs and healing items, you don't use them automatically. You can choose to use them whenever you want. The HUD and the UI was also a little bit less cluttered, which I enjoyed. And it just gives some really good lore and backstory to the Resident Evil games as well on what happened to Leon and Claire and Chris and everyone in between the events of like number 2 and Code Veronica and just before Resident Evil 4 as well. There's all this nice little in-between story pieces that really make the puzzle a whole that they just don't touch on in the mainline game, so this is a really cool story filler. But what knocks this one back down for me to the same level as Umbrella Chronicles is the camera, which is an infamous complaint with this game, that the camera is very, very shaky. And for like the first half of the game or so, I noticed it, but it wasn't detrimental. That second half of the game, it is just impossible to aim where you need to aim sometimes, because Leon's just fucking sitting there like this. It's crazy. But otherwise, very, very good games. I had a super fun January, and I really love all the games that we got to play as well. February is also going to be another pretty interesting month, so stick around if you'd like to see the games that we play then.